Really, one of our primary focuses in the lead up to the election, and then certainly as we're calling races, is going to be transparency, making sure that people really understand all of the effort, the work, the preparation that goes into these race calls, and then making sure that we're being transparent about how we make the calls when they come through. I think the biggest thing that I would emphasize is, we've been doing this at the AP for more than 175 years. And this is a full-time operation for us. This isn't just something that we stand up in an election year. So our teams are really spending, their full time understanding rule changes in states, methodology of voting in states, the rhythm of the counting and the vote tabulations in these states. And at the core of our effort is 4,000 vote count reporters who are going to be all across the country physically in counties, which is where elections in the United States are administered. And they are really our ultimate system of checks and balances, making sure that they are matching up the vote count numbers with the numbers that counties may be putting and states may be putting in their databases. And that's really where this whole operation starts. That data is fed up through the models and into our race analysts and ultimately our decision desk. They have an exceptional accuracy rate, and we're really confident that we're going to be able to deliver on that accuracy, but also be able to transparently explain to the public what we're doing come Tuesday and beyond.
Fascinating. How much human involvement is involved in the moment of making the call versus having criteria in advance that a computer could tell you when you reach that point when certain votes are cast in certain areas of a district, for instance? Are you in a room with your team looking at each other in the eye saying, are we going for this or not?
Yeah, ultimately, the final decision makers on race calls are human journalists at the Associated Press. Our team is the one, humans are the one that make those final decisions. But obviously, we're aided by statistical analysis and modeling and the actual raw data that's coming in. The closer the race is in a particular state, the more you need actual vote count. The more the model is one of the tools in your toolkit, but you're really just looking at the actual vote, the raw vote count that's coming in here. But this is always going to be a situation where we've got a human who's an expert in their state or in their race potentially, depending on the way that we've divided things up that year, and they're the ones that are really helping us make that final call.
How local do you need to get in congressional districts in certain states? You talked about the long history of the Associated Press here. That allows you to understand the nuances of each area that you're calling a race in. How different are they all?
Yeah, so we are down to the county level because, again, I think one of the interesting and unique things about the American system of elections is that there is no federal elections office. There is no federal agency that administers elections, so you don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. And as a result, you actually have elections that are run within states in multiple different ways. And so that's why that team of 4,000 vote count reporters is absolutely essential, because they need to be focused on what's happening in the county that they're in. That's the only thing that they're focused on in that moment, is the way that the election is administered down at that local level. Yep. And we need that level of nuance because of the complexity of these elections.
Coming off of what we saw in 2020 and the expectation for contested races, certainly on the presidential level this year, is there a lawyer involved in making these calls? Do you look at lawsuits or potential recounts in a district before you call it?
So there's no lawyer involved in our act of actually calling the races, but we look at a range of factors when we're making the decision to call a race. And one of the things that we look at is there an automatic recount in a state? Some states have a tiny margin where if the race is within that margin, then it goes to an automatic recount. We want to make sure that the AP race call is not brought up as part of a legitimate legal process. We want to make sure that our race call can stand and withstand any other external factors. So certainly those are factors that we look at, but really ultimately this comes down to a simple question, which is, does the trailing candidate have a way to catch up? And if the answer to that is no, then we decide that we're ready to move forward with that race call.
That's fascinating. What about reports, as we've seen recently, of ballot boxes being set on fire, ballots being destroyed? If you have cases like that, if there's damage to ballots, if you have protests around a precinct, do you have to put things on hold, or does that not impact your model because you're looking at a different sample of the electorate?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I would say that every one of those potential situations is unique and different. And so it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer to that. What we're always looking at in a situation like that is how many ballots are we talking about? You know, are we talking about 10 ballots? Are we talking about 1,000 ballots? Are we talking about 10,000 ballots? Historically, elections in the United States are, while quite complex, exceptionally well run. And the incidence of true voter fraud or moments where large numbers of votes that cannot be counted for some reason in numbers that could actually sway the outcome of the election, that just doesn't exist. You know, we looked back at 2020 to find the number of incidents of true voter fraud, and it was a couple of hundred incidents, and that was a race that was obviously decided by far more. So we watch these things, but really this does come down to the size and the number of votes that we could potentially be talking about.